Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second meeting in the Angular Autumn Camp series. I'm Krzysztof Skorupka, and I am pleased to be your host for today's event. I'm representing the Angular.love team who organized this series. Last month, at our first event, we enjoyed three fantastic talks by Dawid Kostka, Mateusz Stefańczyk, and Manfred Steyer. If you missed it, don't worry, you can still catch the full recording on our YouTube channel. Today we are broadcasting live from Warsaw, Poland, and we would love to hear where you are watching us from, so please be sure to share your location in the comments. And before we go further, a huge thanks to our sponsor, House of Angular, for the support in making these meetups happen. And now let's take a look at what we have lined up for today's event. First, Alex Okrushko will give us SignalStore overview. Then Jérôme Grignon will discuss effortless image optimization in Angular with optimized image. As always, we'll have a Q&A session after each segment, so we highly encourage you to engage in the chat. So feel free to write your questions, share your thoughts, your comments, and interact with others throughout the event. So without further delay, let me introduce our first speaker, Alex Okrushko. He's from Canada. He's a GDE in Angular and also a member of the NgRx core team, where he also shares his expertise through NgRx workshops. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. How are you doing?
It's good. It's good. I'm happy to be part of this meetup, right? In Poland meetup. I was just in Poland last week, which was again great experience as part of the NG Poland. I was happy to meet many of the House of Angular team members there as well. Greg, especially. Hey, Greg, if you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, great to hear that. So I'm also excited about the upcoming Angular 19 release. It's just around the corner, right? And it's pretty packed, I would say, as we could hear on NG Poland in the keynote. So I would like to ask you, what's your favorite feature in Angular 19? Which one are you awaiting the most?
Which one is my favorite for Angular 19? There's a lot of talk about the partial hydration and things like that. So that one seems exciting, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Are we getting? We're basically getting to resumability and all those things, which is it a new hype? Is it the real thing that we were really missing? But I'm very happy that the framework would enable all of these features now, whether you actually need them or not.
Yeah, it could be like some of us will need it, some of us not. But yeah, I agree that it's great that the framework evolves and gives us some new possibilities in this area.
100%.
Yeah, and getting into the topic of NgRx, since 2024 is almost over, what will be your preferred set of state management solutions for 2025? I mean, what you are betting on, is this a duo of Global Store and SignalStore, or maybe just the latter?
That's a great question. That's actually a great question. It's almost part of my discussion or conversation during the presentation as well, because again, we always had true and trusted, our workhorse NgRx global store, and it's been always for anything shared, globally shared, it's been always the most important part, I guess. This is the one that pretty much almost any enterprise using Angular would be using as well. And then we got the local store, right, that was solving other problems as well. Now we have a SignalStore. Again, I'm going to go into details during the presentation, but
Right.
the SignalStore was kind of like, it can do a little bit more than just local store, right? And now there's a new proposal that is very exciting that can pretty much then have event-based within SignalStore, which basically would say, which our recommendation will probably shift to, hey, always start with SignalStore, and then we can work through things further. So
Right.
it's an interesting future. I think we'll see where it goes and how the RFC is. It's not part of the NgRx new SignalStore yet, but it'll be see how people feel about it. RFC is open in our NgRx platform repo, so that'll be very interesting how people accept this.
Yeah, that's true. So we encourage everyone to also take a look at the RFC, maybe provide your input. That would be great. Yeah, so I will not ask more to not spoil anything. So let's get directly to the presentation. Alex, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you all. So if you were at the NG Poland this year, or actually also in NG Rome this year, you might have seen some of these slides already. I'm going to go over the main things that I wanted to present, but I'm also going to veer off a little bit to give a larger overview of SignalStore and how we see it today. Also, I'm fully aware that Mateusz did a very nice presentation at the last meetup. He covered a lot of things already, which is awesome. I'll try to go just a little bit back a bit and just to go into fundamentals first, and then we can expand on that. So that's basically the plan of this presentation. All right, so and all its title, custom features of NgRx SignalStore. Again, I'm going to go a bit broader with the overviews of things. All right, so let's see. So what do we have here? We actually are fully aware that we have, global store, we just mentioned, right? And we had the component store as well. That is our local state management solution. And we were pretty happy how things are turning out, right? They were working together well. But then, signals are around the corner. That was last year. Actually, we knew about the signals almost 2 years ago, maybe even more. We've been talking to Angular team fairly frequently. We saw how Pavel and Alex were pushing Angular into this new reactive primitive world. So, and we've been in conversations with them how it can affect NgRx as well. But anyhow, signals were there. What do we do? Well, we do a lot of things. But first, again, I was already introduced. I'm currently the front-end lead at Snowflake, part of the NgRx team for a while. Angular GDE, and I'm active around the Angular and JavaScript events around Toronto area. That's me with this aside. Signals were around, and what do we do? Well, if you're already using Global Store or using Component Store for local state management, you don't have to fear a lot because we created an APIs that will return you signals instead of observables. For example, store select signal with exact same selector as you've been using before will return you a signal back, right? Store select gives you observable, store select signal gives you signal. So if you're very eager to make your application like signal based, very easy change for you. And then instead of async pipe in the templates, now you can just call signals as they are. Very simple change. Same for component store. Not a ton of things you have to do so your existing solutions would still work with a signal world. And this is one of the principles of the NgRx teams as well, right? To keep upgrading and maintaining NgRx as the new things from Angular are introduced. And we're very proud of us being able to keep up with all of these things. It's one of the principles how we operate as a team. So you might say, okay, so signal problem is solved, right? Why do we need this new thing called SignalStore? Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Well, the answers are interesting. We know that Angular has been evolving as a framework, and TypeScript also been evolved, right? And as TypeScript or Angular introduce new features, we try to make NgRx more powerful, more stricter typing, more auto-generated things, and things of that nature. But one of the bigger limitations, it's not even limitations, it's just the way we're injecting things into components, classes, whatever else, services, is through class constructor, right? So the only way we can get things injected into a thing was always through class. That's why, for example, our global store is class-based, right? Our component store is also class-based because we need to inject things into the class. Now, there was an evolution, and inject function became available within Angular. And then that means you can all you care about, you don't need classes anymore. All you care is to execute that within the injectable context of component or anything else. And that opened the whole, door of possibilities. So let's just first look at some of the limitations of some class-based approaches. One of them is typing, right? Again, it's not very possible to create a dynamic class and have properties and methods that are strongly typed. What do I mean by that? I mean, obviously, you can add things to the class dynamically, but it won't be reflected in that instance type, for example, at least not very easily to do that. The other one is tree shaking. I'd say this one's, it's somewhat interesting, but the idea behind this, if you have properties and methods that are within the class and all of a sudden you stop using them anywhere, they still are part of the bundle, because anything part of the class, won't be tree shaken, right? If you use the class itself. Is it a big thing? It could be. But I'd say in our enterprise application, that's a minor thing, but it's still one of the things. But one of the biggest ones for me is extensibility. And the extensibility is that this is actually where it's huge. So again, multiple inheritance is not supported in classes. And it's not very easy to extend the class as well. I mean, you can inherit again, but again, this introduces more problems than solutions. And extensibility is actually the reason why SignalStore came to be. Because, introducing a whole new state management library, a third one, in fact, right, should not be taken lightly. And we already saw that just signals alone is not really the reason why SignalStore came to be, because our existing APIs for the two previous solutions were adjusted to support signals. And this thing actually changes everything. That's how I feel it. But let's first take a look how we would actually create SignalStore. And again, some of you may be already familiar, but bear with me. I'm going to go over this quickly. So say we have some kind of state that we want to maintain, like book state, right? So we have some array of books. And book is, again, an object that has some ID, title, price, stuff like that. This is very much a toy example, but I just want to show you what the SignalStore consists of. So how do we create a SignalStore? Well, we call a SignalStore function, right? So we call that function, and that function takes a bunch of things in it. One of the things that it can take as an argument is with state function. So you can see it takes functions inside as well. And with state, what it does is it will create a book's signal inside of it. it's a little bit more than that. But again, for this example, let's just think of it that we will have a books signal as a result of this one. But this is the state that the signal store will maintain, again, books. Now, a lot of times, if you've been using NgRx already, you have a selectors, right? Selectors are what are they doing? They are creating derived state. So based on some kind of state that we have under the new, we actually create a derived state based on that state. In this case, if we want to compute like free books, right, we will use new Angular's computed, and we get the books already with the state, and we can just filter them, for by price equals 0. And this will get us computed value of free books. And we can now use it also once we inject SignalStore. So these are automatically recalculated, right? You don't have to do it. It's kind of packaged within your SignalStore. So now we have the state itself, the derived state. Next thing we need is also how we operate on the state. Again, we're trying to keep things encapsulated. So anything that affects the state should be within the SignalStore as well. And that means methods. Methods, for example, in this case, I have a method to add a book, right? So if I want to add a book, I can patch the state and update my new books value in immutable way, right? So I need to spread the previous one and append the book at the end. This method now becomes part of the SignalStore as well. Now, there's one more thing that's it's a fundamental part of state management is our lifecycle hooks. So for example, what do we do when this SignalStore initializes or being destroyed? In this case, we have with hooks, right? And we can call on init or on destroy when this SignalStore would be initialized, instantiated, or destroyed together with the lifecycle of a component. All right. So how do we use this? How do we use the SignalStore? Well, there are multiple ways to use the SignalStore. In this case, this SignalStore is not meant to be a singleton. Right? I'll repeat, this one's not meant to be a singleton in this case, because we want to tie it to a life cycle of a particular component. In this case, we will specify in the providers, you can see there the bookstore right there. So what does it mean? It means that before this component is created, the SignalStore will not exist at all. Once this component is created, right, then the SignalStore would be initialized and it will be later injected as we do here. So this is the books. Good. So now, let me see. There you go. I didn't update the slide. All right. The idea still is like if we want to add the book, we can add the book. I had to do this before. And then we can read the book's signal as it is, and free books. Remember that computed one is also there. This slide needs to be updated. Yeah, but the idea is still the same. So this is how you would use this. You can also use the SignalStore as a singleton. You can provide that configuration as part of the first argument, saying provided in root, and that way it'll be basically a singleton, just like your other services that provided in root or other injectables with provided in root. When you don't provide it as a root, when you provide it as a life cycle of a component, it will be attached to the life cycle of the component, means it will be also destroyed when the component is destroyed. So it'll auto clean up itself. But anyhow, as you saw, we have 4 building blocks of this state management, right? So we have with state, with computed, with methods, and with hooks, right? Those are major building blocks. And what's interesting that the return type of all of these functions is actually a SignalStore feature. Why is it interesting? The reason why it's interesting is that the SignalStore itself actually doesn't care what you provide to it. all it takes is just a multiple SignalStore features, right? So you can provide as many of them as you want. You can provide even multiple with states if you want, right? They'll basically fold one to each other. So each next one will be aware of the previous one as well, right? So that is basically the flow. And this is, again, this is very, very powerful, that the SignalStore itself does not care what with state, what each individual function does. What it does at the end, again, it basically collects the array of them, right? All of them. Now, what that means is we can provide further extensibility to this. And for that, we have a special function called SignalStore feature. That function also can take a number of SignalStore features, right? And then it packages them into one specific SignalStore feature, right? So it can take a whole array of them, and at the end it packages them in one. You can think of it as basically does the reduce on that array and calls one to each other, right? So it's also a very simple function. In fact, it doesn't really care what each of the SignalStore feature do, but it just packages them together into one single one. And with this, now we can provide what we call those custom features. Let's take a look, again, very primitive example, loading state. As part of the any applications, you would have a loading state over the API, right? Although, again, there's new resource API and other things. We're not gonna touch on this right now, but if you're manually calling like HTTP client, you're kind of manually also managing its loading state. Let's see an example of what we can do with this one. And by the way, if you have questions, you can always ask them in the chat, and we'll get to them as well. But anyhow, think of the loading state. So we have a request status that could be idle, pending, fulfilled, or it could be an error, right? That's the request status of any API with the word get, put, whatever. Now we will package this state, right, in a single property, request status property. Let's create a special custom feature for it. So we'll create a function called with request status, and it will return a SignalStore feature, right? And remember, this is a special function that can take multiple store features and kind of package them together. What can we put there? Well, first we'll do the with state, and we'll provide the initial state, for example, with idle. Now we'll create with computed, and we'll create a few things there. Things like is pending, right, when the request status is pending, is fulfilled when the request status is equal to fulfilled, and error as well, right? It'll be computed. If it's an object, we'll kind of extract that error string outside of it. So we are packaging with state and with computed together in a single feature, and this feature will be with request status. This will be our custom feature. How will we use it? Well, remember the SignalStore feature returns you this store feature, right? And that means we could just use it in place in our existing SignalStore. Because again, once again, SignalStore does not care what exactly you provide to it as long as it adheres to that interface. And just like that, with a simple function call, with a simple feature like this, all of a sudden we have a request status itself, right? It's a signal of request status. And we have other computed things like, is it pending? Is it fulfilled? Is it error? See how powerful that is? And what's interesting is you can add now this custom feature anywhere in your SignalStore, and it will automatically add that state and this computer property. So you can really reuse it in any of the SignalStores that you create within your application. All right. So then you can basically continue to inject, for example, book service in this case, and do the patch state, first to set pending, right? That set pending will also, this will be a special functions we call custom updaters, right? So that set pending will set the request status to pending, and set fulfill will set it to fulfill, obviously. And again, just like that, it's a lot less code to type, and you basically have the reusable functionality of this API state. All right, let's see a more complicated feature, right? A more complex one. For example, entities. Again, if you're not using entities, you should be using entities. It's a much better way to manage collections. We typically keep collections as an array, and that's fine if you consume it as an array and you never change the array by itself, right? You don't never delete one or remove one or update one of the items in the array. You can just have it as an array. That's fine. However, if you are manipulating that collection, it's much easier to do it through entities. It's also a more performant way to do it through entities, because whenever you're updating a single book, for example, in our book collection, or removing one book in book collection, it takes an O of 1 time complexity, right? So it's instant, right? It's because of a special structure that entity state provides. With that in mind, we want to utilize this with entity. And for example, now instead of an array, we can do with entities, and let's say, hey, you'll be working with book. And all of a sudden, it creates it creates a specific structure that allows you to operate on this. So for example, when we need to add a book, all we have to do is to say, hey, patch the state and add entity of a book, and it will automatically add to that entity. Removing the book, or even, for example, updating all entities at once, make all of the books free, right? We can custom patch that. Again, super useful. It removes all the error-prone operations involving manipulating an array that we need to keep immutable, right? It helps a ton with all of these things. And this entities is actually part of the NgRx signals package as well. I think it's NgRx signals / entities or entity. Cool. All right. So this is some of the thing. This is actually the one that comes out of box, provided by NgRx itself. But again, there's tons of other ideas floating around, right? You can have with the router state, or you can have with local storage sync, right? Automatically syncing your state to local storage. With forms was floating around as well, right? And we can easily do these things and wrap these things within the SignalStore. It's very, very powerful. Mateusz last time showed some of his examples within his code base. Has he been taking this custom functionalities, and whether you reuse them across your code base or even just extracting out of a single SignalStore, that's fine. It's a very valid use case, either or. All right, and then again, there's a lot of the community projects already that are adding these custom features. For example, Manfred was here last time as well, and a team, Reiner as well, Mike. They've been creating, working on something like NgRx Toolkit with their own take on the custom features, right? So they've been adding some things. Again, these are not official NgRx team provided things. These are community custom things that folks are adding. Like Reduct DevTools, or with data service, right? They're wrapping the entire service already, including more functionality into their custom features. So I'd recommend to take a look at them. The other one that is very visible on our radar is NgRx Traits Signals by Gabriel Guerrero, and this one is helping work with the data, with the table data that's already on the client side loaded, right? So the entire data you have on the client side, now you want to add some pagination, sorting, filtering, again, selection of entities and things like that. he created a whole bunch of things, and I think he continues to add more and more features there. Again, another one interesting to take a look at. And these ones are becoming more interesting, and people want to share their custom features. So with that in mind, what we're working on right now is also adding a page at the NgRx IO where people can share their custom feature plugins that they want to share with the rest of the people, right? They won't be part of the NgRx Signals package, but you can always like npm install them from their own npm repositories, right? So that will be, again, one of the things that can help you pick one that's already created, or maybe even take a look at it and get inspired to create your own. Maybe somebody solved some in some way already the problem that you're trying to solve. All right. So again, just a quick summary on this. All NgRx state management solutions are signal ready, right? So if you have the previous ones, again, you don't have to migrate off. They're all maintained. All three of them are maintained. We're not deprecated one in favor of the other, right? We keep maintaining them. But what we do this, we still recommend start with a SignalStore, especially if you're if you're keeping up with Angular versions. So the latest SignalStore is highly extensible. And again, its extensibility is the primary reason why it exists to begin with, right? And the latest Angular innovations allowed us to actually create this, which is, again, by the way, I'd want to do a special call out here. Marco was the lead for a lot of the SignalStore development. Been working over a year on that before it was published last year. Almost exactly last year, before in Poland it was published. And within a year, right now it reached almost 120,000 downloads. And in the state management world of Angular, it now became the third most popular or most downloaded state management solution, after, of course, our trusted global store and component store, right? But it says a very high rise there, and we expect it to eventually take the second spot as well. All right. And finally, again, there are community-created solutions, and we plan to have a page so you can take a look at some of them. And they're not just scattered, so we can assemble them in one place so you can see what people are working, what people are contributing. All right. With that, again, many thanks to our trusted team members within NgRx, Brandon Rombers and Tim DeShriver, with a huge maintenance of the NgRx over the years. Again, specifically want to call out Marco, who has been incredible addition to our team now what, 3-4 years back, probably 3 years back or something. And again, his incredible efforts on working on this NgRx Signal package, including the SignalStore. And one more call out is for Rainer, who became our trusted collaborator earlier, sometime mid this year. It's been phenomenal in within our team, helping team, going over the issues, proposing new changes. Again, very much hands-on and very phenomenal guy. So we're very happy that he's helping us as well. With that in mind, also, again, this is where you can find us. We are on Twitter, well, now X, LinkedIn. We have a Discord as well. Our docs is NgRx.io, a blog, workshops. By the way, we do workshops every so often. We plan to restart the workshops for Europe in January and for US in February. So keep an eye on that. We'll be posting them either at the NgRx.io/workshops or workshops where the Tito /NgRx. They'll be also there. And of course, NgRx is open source, so you can always find things at the GitHub repo. This is where I have issues, discussions. There's a number of RFCs open now. Join the conversations, provide your inputs. They all help shape the future of NgRx. With that, again, thank you, and I'll be very happy to answer any other questions that you might have. I don't know if we have questions immediately after my presentation or later on, but
yeah. So thank you, Alex, first of all, for your great presentation. And yeah, now it's time to dive into the Q&A session dedicated to your talk. So we already have a couple of them. Some of them were already answered or partially answered by other folks on the chat, but would be also great to hear from you. So let's get this one as a starting point. So how can I properly use SignalStore with route cards to listen to route events and evoke its methods? I also tried injecting it into the ng module, but it seems like SignalStore works only for components.
Yeah, the router story is still something that we're working on. It's true that component is the primary use case for a lot of these things. I think we even have an issues open on this one. So I probably won't have any more information for this right now, but let me see. I have actually issues open right now as well. Yeah, but yes, and I see some. I think it'll be great to have this conversation within the issues. It's a very valid question, so thank you for the question. And sorry, I cannot just give you the answer right now for this one.
Right. No worries. And then the other one, should one use with entities in combination with state?
Good question. So entities adds, you can use it. And again, you can have even multiple with the states. Remember, the SignalStore doesn't really care what you're providing. It just, hey, if you provide another with state, it'll create another signal for it. It's actually deep signal it'll create as well, which means any of its property also can be signals. But anyhow, the main idea is that you can add as many as you want if you want to, or you can package in different features. Remember how we just right now had one feature that adds its own with state, and then entities has also with state inside of it. That's all fine. With entities, we'll create your entity collection, right? But if you want to add anything else to that entity collection beside of it, sure, that's fine. You can use it. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if I would recommend to have a SignalStore, a separate SignalStore for each entity. And again, frequently or sometimes these ones will live in the global scope, which be for root, right? You can just create a number of them, for each SignalStore for its own entity. And that way they're kind of separated, and each one maintains and 100% owns that state and everything that you can derive off that state, and also all the methods to operate on that state, right? So this way your SignalStore just doesn't grow out of control. Yeah, so that will be my recommendation. You can have a multiple of SignalStores like that.
Nice. Okay, and the next one, I believe this one is being asked a lot. I've heard it multiple times already. So maybe about the dev tool, like for the global store, if there is something similar for the SignalStore.
Yes, very good question. And again, I've had this question many times as well, and my answer becomes more and more confident as I go. So first of all, I showed that Manfred had I think it's like with the DevTools as part of his NgRx toolkit. That will, I think, try to connect to the DevTools some of the things. However, the reason why we were not adding anything specific for SignalStore, like DevTool like that, it's because Angular Dev Tools we were hoping that they will be help you to see what's happening within signals, so you don't need to have anything specific for NgRx for this. And now we are more and more confident that that's going to happen in the very not too far future. Just not to spoil anything else, I think. We talked to the Angular team about this. There's something in the works to actually see signal states in general. So we assume that SignalStore will just can probably naturally fall into that, and we don't need to have a special dev tools for this as well. However, there's another thing. I kind of touched it at the beginning. There's a new RFC to add event-based changes also to SignalStore. And when I say event-based, you might think of like Redux kind of based as well. So you can still use SignalStore as it is, but you would have an option to also have some global events happening. And for that, we might add some DevTools support, but they'll be in the Redux DevTools, the ones that you're already probably using with Global Store. All of that is still in the RFC mode, but there's I think it's a bright future for that as well.
Right. Okay, so there is another one about how would you handle data relationship in the store?
Oh, how would you handle data relationship in the store? That's a very open question. I had a talk about component store some time ago, and I called it the use cases of component store. I think that was 2 years ago at NgRx. And I was talking about 4 use cases for component store. The same 4 use cases apply for SignalStore and as well, except for one of the use cases when I was saying the global state was not quite recommended for component store. For SignalStore, it's fine. So the main idea is you could have stores at different levels, right? Like basically two separate things. One is the globally injected SignalStore, right? Or again, your global inject store is also globally injected. Think of that as one type of globally injected data. And then you have a locally injected data. It means it's not singleton, and it's injected at component at specific level. Now, for the global data, right, that data should be a source of truth for a specific thing. For example, books, right? It has no idea how books are used, but it keeps that state of a books. It solely owns this. It talks to the services that persist this data to the backend, or retrieve the data from the backend, or even, local storage or whatever else you want to do. It basically owns that 100%. And all the methods that operate on that state are part of that store, right? It has no idea about the rest of the business logic of your components. And then you'll have components that could be injected at different levels. If you think of the node, again, the tree of components, think of one of them as like a node, and it has some data as well, local data. And it can also inject books from the global SignalStore as well, right? So that component will be managing, that SignalStore will be managing specific components state, right? And we call that local state. So the SignalStore is used as a local state for that component. That's another use case, again, very popular. And the third one that I'll just mention quickly right now is one in the middle. For example, it would be some SignalStore that's injected at some branch of this component tree. The idea is once you inject something in the branch and one of the components within the branch that has further children out, that store can it's provided by that component, so it's tied to the life cycle of that component. But also it could be injected anywhere in the children where they need some data from it as well, right? So this is where we use the component injection hierarchy, right? And this is very popular. For example, say you have like a dashboard and you have major pages, and once you get to that page, only then you need specific data. And that data could be shared across multiple children within that page, right? The multiple components. And then once you move to another page, you kind of clean this all up, destroy it, and it's gone. So this is the third use case. We'll call it like a branch state. This is a very brief overview of handling the data relationship in the store. And I hope that's what the question was about. But if you think of these use cases, even three that I just mentioned right now, that should help you with the architecture of your app and how you think about the data. And this is actually one of the other things that I want to mention is when we typically create applications, we think about, or hopefully we think about the component tree structure, but we also should think about the data structure, the data flow structure, where what is used and how things flow through the tree. And that one is almost like a parallel tree of the data flows, right? Once you have that realization and these three types of usages, it basically now start almost all of your data needs within the application start fit in the specific mental models of boxes, right? In this case. And hopefully some of my former teammates on the comments there, hopefully they can support this, because I've been talking about this forever within the company that I used to work before.
Right. Yeah, so this was pretty generic question, but yeah, the answer was really informative. I believe it really highlights the flexibility of where we can use the SignalStore. Okay, so this would be the last question. I kept it for the very end. When is NG Toronto coming?
That's a great question. The answer is it's very challenging. The economics of holding the conference in Toronto, which I've been looking for many years, even before pandemic, it's very complicated. Toronto is very expensive city, hotel wise. So it's very challenging. So hotel and venues are ridiculously expensive, but it's also a major development hub. For now, it's very hard to make the economics work, and I'm looking at this every so often, revisiting this idea. Thank you for the question.
I see. Okay, so that was the last question. I believe there are still some left in the chat, so maybe Alex, you can answer them asynchronously.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, thank you for joining us again, and I hope to see you soon at future meetups.
Yeah, thank you. See you.
Take care. Okay, now, before we introduce our second speaker, I would like to remind you about the free webinar, How to Build Scalable Angular Architecture in 2025, with Angular expert and blogger Mateusz Stefańczyk. As you can see, this guy is really living in the future. So it will take place in 1 week, November 21st at 2 p.m. Central European Time. So this is a great opportunity for learning key principles and best practices for building scalable, reliable Angular apps. So don't miss this opportunity out. And the link will be also in the chat. You can scan the QR code you are seeing right now. And yeah, now it's time to welcome our second speaker, Jérôme Grignon. He's from France. He's a passionate supporter of the Angular community and also a creator of AngularHub.com, a central resource for Angular devs. Beyond that, he also leads Angular Devs France, and recently he was recognized as the creator of the visual Angular feature roadmap, or so-called Angular's Can I Use? Yeah, hello, Jerome.
Hello. Yeah, a lot of stuff. And you were talking about NG Toronto with Alex, and we were thinking about doing the same in France because it's been a while. It was NG Europe. It was I think it was one of the first Angular events, but it's quite about the same. It's quite hard with the economics finding sponsors. So
Um,
yeah, but we have
yeah,
already a great European community and a lot of events. We had NG Poland, which happened last week. So yeah, it's it's a great moment to be part of this community. There's so many opportunities just to meet people to grow as a Angular developer.
yeah, that's right. And I see that it's probably really challenging cost-wise, as you said, to organize such a big conference. So
Yeah.
we are lucky that we had a chance to meet in Poland last week. So we mentioned NG Poland. So how did you like it, and overall your time in Poland?
Yeah, it was my first NG Poland. That's my first year attending Angular events. I was used in France to attend more generic events like DevFest or Devox, but it was really great. It's like you feel like it's like a NG family. So everyone is so welcoming. There are so positive vibes, and yeah, Darius is making a wonderful job and to to make everyone really good and comfortable with such a big event.
Right. And I have to ask you exactly the same question I asked Alex. What's your favorite from the upcoming Angular 19 release?
I'm both excited about new experimental features about signals with linked signals with resource, but I also enjoy improvements about SSR. It has been hard to promote Angular SSR in the past. I think that even my side, if someone wanted to make some SSR application for ICO concerns, the the only obvious solution was Next.js because you can't you can when you care about SEO you can just have something which average or which just fine. You need to be the best one. You need to be the top results or on search engines. So yeah, that's really great to see that they are filling the gap to make it really a good SSO framework.
Yeah, that's right. We've been waiting for so long for a good SSR story in Angular, and finally it's there and it's getting better and better. That's just great. Yeah. And as I already mentioned, you are the author of the Angular Hub and also this Angular's Can I Use. So are there any insights or like unique surprises that you met along the way when like working on these two platforms? By the way, they are both great products. I really like them. They are really helpful. So yeah, anything to share with the community about them?
About the insight, after passing my bootcamp, I quickly started making open source, and you can really, it's a great opportunity for everyone, even if you're just a student or a junior and getting started. Uh, you can see so many ways to code and to learn out of it. And about the community itself, because Angular Hub is about the community. When I started it, so it's a listing of events of communities. I was wondering about making some automation to save me some time, and started working on it for making some web scraping. But at the end, sometimes by making it manually unlocked, having more discussions with people. Like, oh, there is a bug on your website, something is wrong about your event, and you start talking with people. And that's how it started with Angular.love, by talking with Natalia about some stuff about the event. And I'm even wearing my pink hoodie Natalia gave me. It was at NgRx this year. So yeah, really, that's really great.
Yeah.
As soon as you just involve in the community, you don't need to be community organizer or leader. By just being here, by just meeting people, you can unlock so many opportunities for your job, or just to learn more about what you're doing on your daily job.
Yep. So glad to hear that we were also a part of this story. And yeah, without a further delay, Jerome, welcome on the stage.
Thank you. So we will talk about effortless image optimization because we are lazy, and this new directive, even it's been there for a while, but it makes us really lazy. And okay, so in my company we have full stack devs, we have backend devs, we have front-end devs, but we also have UI devs. There are not quite a lot in companies. There are people just making HTML and CSS, and not only they really enjoy doing it, but they're really expert at it. And suddenly they discover that rather than just using the SRC attribute for images, we had code base with this attribute, and that's not a native one. They know all native attributes. They're really good at it, but they wonder, what is this change? Why do we use a specific one? And by starting discovering this directive, they were quite confused because we still have height, white. We can use loading, so it's about native. So what does it bring for us? And so this talk, there are already two blog posts on Angular.love about optimize image, about performance. But for this talk, we will dive in the code base itself. So you will see a lot of code, but that's a good opportunity to see what's under the hood, because that's, even if it's in the Angular code base, it's still a directive, like you could create one. So that's a good opportunity to understand that there are some quite simple ways to discover the code base. And so let's start with comments. So comments in the code base. What it is about. So this directive is about improving the image loading performance by enforcing best practices. So best practices is not just about what the Angular team feels like about being great for performance, for the user experience. It's also about the Chrome team, because both teams work together to make it possible, to make this directive using all these best practices. But if you're not quite used to directive, if you're new to Angular, so when we are thinking about directives, sometimes they're defined as templateless component, like there's Slack component, but without a template. But in fact, components are directives with a template. So every component or directive, but with another decorator and with a template also. So the goal of directives is about putting some logic in your templates in an abstract and isolated way. So let's get back to the command. So that's the directive. The idea is to ensure that the loading of what we call LCP is prioritized. LCP is one of the core Web Vitals metrics. It's about looking at your biggest image when you're loading a web page. It's important because sometimes it's quite delayed for some reasons, and you might start wanting to interact with the application, and suddenly the image appears and you have a bad experience about that. So how to change it, or to provide a good experience for users and some peak performance. Oh, sorry. Okay, so it's about setting the fetch priority, which is a native attribute already, using lazy loading for non-priority images, and by default. And also for SSR consents using a pre-connect link tag in the document 8. And oh yeah, in addition, it's also about generating asset URLs, because you could use an image loader, about using SRC set, like in native way, wide and 8, and to warn if wide and weight has been set incorrectly, and to warn once again for another reason, because in fact there are 13 cancel warn in this directive API, and it might throw 21 times. So this directive, it's about best practices by combining your code, but it's also about warning you if there is something wrong about what you are doing. And so, for example, this is what happened in NgRx lifecycle hook for this directive. So we have all these assertions to make sure that everything is fine. And the last line is about setting the host attributes. So you won't set native attributes like SRC sets, like SRC itself, and like loading, like fetch priority, and this directive will take care about it once all the assertions were evaluated. And so that's the smallest definition of the code base for this directive. So like any directive in your Angular application, you have the decorator. Now it's standalone, like as we were used to now. And there is this selector. If you are not used, once again, to directive, that's a CSS selector. So it can target anything that you provide here. So for this example, it means that if you're using the NgSRC attribute on image HTML tag, it will understand that it should use the directive logic upon it. But it might not be quite easy to see if you imported the optimized image directive correctly. You might have some bad experience about it, and I really encourage you. So we have. So that's the new version, and I really encourage you to give a try to WebStorm. I'm not affiliate to JetBrains, but that's really a great idea, and it's not free for non-commercial use. So if you're a student, junior, or you just want to make some code on your free time, give it a try. It has been free since 1 or 2 months, so that's really, really great. It doesn't use the Angular language service directly to help you, but there is a really great built-in plugin. And so let's get back to this quite simple definition. That's not the whole code, and in fact, there is also the host metadata being used to define a lot of styles, because by default it will add some style based on 2 situations, in fact, about using a field property and about using a placeholder property, and we will see about it later on. But as you can see, it's not just about logic itself or using some attributes, but also about using some styles. And so the first input that you will see in the code base, and it's obvious, it's the NgSrc. It's required. There is a transform to make sure that it's a safe URL, and it's defined as being processed to be applied at the end as the src property. And one of the first errors that you can make is about using the native one, src, and the NgSrc. And by doing so, your browser will try to resolve src, and it will not apply to all the logic about this directive. And if you do so, there is an annotation about that to make sure that you are not using src on the host element. So that's one of the errors. It might feel complicated, but it's way easier to read in your DevTools. You also have an error if you set the src set on your own also, with, once again, a big error. And the second input that is used and that we want to use for LCP, largest contentful paint, is called priority. Priority use a transform a Boolean attribute. It means that you can just define it like that. You don't need to set it at priority equal true. By just being set on the image will be enough for Angular to know that it has to set it as a priority element. And by being priority, it means that the native way to do so, and what Angular is doing under the hood, is about adding the fetch priority to hide and using loading at eager. So it's really a priority, a big priority, a high priority about fetching it and making sure that you're not loading it as lazy, but eager. And about this loading, there is another input that you might want to use, but only on specific use case. It's about, by default, all your images will be lazy. But be careful, because if you like to put one as eager, you might start considering using priority before. Because priority will use loading here, but will also add a fetch priority to hide. And we also have an error if we have too many priority attribute being used in the page. So by default, it's about 10 attributes. So if you have 11 images with priority, there are too many priorities in your page, so it's really bad, and you should consider removing some of them. One of the obvious attributes that you need is the wide and the hide. They are required if you're not using another attribute called fill. And 1000 pixel. 1000 pixel, depending on your dot page, might be quite big, and it's the oversight image tolerance. So if there is a 1000 pixel difference between your actual image wide or size, wide or height, and so between the actual one and the rendered one, you will get a warning. So if you're trying to use a big image for just an icon, for example, Angular will let you know, but it means that if there is only 900 pixels of difference, you won't get a warning. So still be careful about that. I was talking about the fill input. So this fill input will allow you to define the image as taking all the space available. So if you're setting fill, you don't need to put the height and the wide on the image. But you need to be careful, because you need to move this image with the full input within a container using position relative, because the image itself will be absolute. If you don't do it, you will have some weird behavior in your page. Another one is about the input NgRx set, which puts the SRC set by default like that will enable putting different values. So depending on your set images with the size, and the browser will resolve them based on the current context of your user. So you can just define them like that and let the browser define what the best value to use, or you can use also with that size, which is more recent API in the browsers, and which will allow to provide a more responsive behavior for your images. And so you define it like that with size, and it will use a different image based on some breakpoints that you define. So, for example, for the first one, if we use the third image, the second one, the second image, and so on and so on. So you can really define the behavior that you want. We also have a placeholder inputs, because you might have some heavy image event if you try to optimize it, and you might want, rather than having a blank space in your page, to have some placeholder. So, for example, you can define something like that, having not a small image, but a low quality image, which will be used as a placeholder for image. And once it's fine, you can use it, and you have a beautiful way to be banned from Italian meetups. And so we have some options, some definition for placeholder. So about the blur, the default blur radius, there is the dimension. So there is a warning if the placeholder is too big, because you don't want a high quality image. And there are some warning about the data URL being used with a lot of options under the hood. Another option is about image loader. You might want to use your local images, but nowadays we have solutions like Cloudinary, which enable to host your image, and depending on query params in your request, to query different images with different size, different qualities. And Angular is providing some image loaders by default, like for Cloudinary. And the idea is that it's really easy to use for you, because it will define what is required for Cloudinary, for example, here, to define the quality query params. And for Cloudflare, for example, quality is defined in another way. So you don't have to deal with that, but you could create a custom image loader if you need. There is also SRC concerns about images. So that's here this part of this code. So it's from the directive, and it's quite a common code if you are used to SSR. You're looking for the server platform, and it's a solution to test if your code is running in the browser or on server side. And it's used in multiple ways in the directive. So it tests, for example, about the priority count, so not to check it on server side. It's used to create the preloading link tag on the server side, because it's useful in this situation. And it avoids to assert about placeholder dimensions on server side, because you don't care about this placeholder at this point. And that's all for this small introduction about the code itself. Was under the hood. As you can see, it's a lot of inputs. It's some small util function being used to help define and to help provide you all these best practices. So it's really a great directive, so you can really work on and focus about images, and even if you're not an expert. And yeah, you can see a small snapshot of the project that Chris was talking about, if you want to track all changes in your application.
Okay, Jérôme, thank you very much for the presentation. That was really insightful. And now let's jump to the Q&A session. Please be sure to ask your questions in the chat. And let's see if there is anything already there for us. Okay, there is one, I believe. Can we load DICOM images with more resolutions?
I don't know about DICOM at all, I confess. I could try to see about it, but it might require anyway some. I don't know. Yeah. If there is already an API provided by DICOM to load different resolutions, it might be quite enough. And if not, you might need to maybe to use. I don't know if you can use some image loader as a middleware. So to call your image loader, which will call DICOM, and letting your image loader making all the logic to resize images.
Okay, right. Thank you. And I don't see any further questions, so maybe let me ask one more. Are there any scenarios when you would not really recommend to use this optimized image directive, or you would rather say, please go with this one every time you are dealing with images? There should be no issues, whatever you are working with.
And by talking with UI devs that we have in the company, the main concern was about having some custom strategy about the position of the element. I think that the most the pain point is about setting statically the height and the width. And even if you can use SRC sets and size for some different behavior, sometimes I think that we were all used to define either the height or the height, and the other one to 100%, and to make it easily responsive. But I'd say that optimization for performance is always a great thing, but you might just be in a quite simple situation where you could say that, okay, it's fine if I'm using a big image and though there is only one, but if you have some page with a lot of images, I think that it will be difficult not to care about performance, and it will. You could say you could do it in a custom way on your, but this directive is really about helping you to make good choice, to make good decisions, and to having some help about it tests distortion, for example, to make sure that the image is not distorted, and so it's really great for us.
Right. Thank you for the answer. And we have another one. So do we not need to provide all the with and hate attributes anymore when trying to use the directive?
It's only if you don't want, you can use fill not to set it. But the idea is still about using the smallest image that you could. So I'd keep fill for background images like that, stuff like that. But you would still have to put the height and the white. Putting the height and the white is one of the main concern for SCP for your biggest image, because you want to save this place even if the image is not here. So the strategy is about saving the space. If it's a big image, and even with priority can take some time, you can use a placeholder, so it will be loaded way faster. And yeah, you need to save some space. Or I think that we all use of this website, or the website is loaded, you're trying to click on a button and suddenly there is an image or some link. Yeah, we are all used to this link. So yeah, you need for a lot of cases it might be quite annoying sometimes to find the right dimension, but you need to set it.
Right. Yeah, I believe we all know this pain. Right, it's like this shifter. Just crazy. Okay, so we've reached the end of our Q&A session. Once again, Jerome, thank you very much for the outstanding presentation and your valuable contributions. And hopefully, see you again soon.
Yeah, see you.
Bye. Yeah, so this wraps up the final lecture for today. Our next event is coming soon, but first let me remind you that your feedback is incredibly valuable for us. So please take a moment to fill out a survey about your experience today. This really helps us improve future events. And thanks again for being part of Angular.love community and for your great attendance today. Our next event will be held online on December 3rd at 6 p.m., featuring special guests Minko Gechev and Fanny Sprodrom. Don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated. And until then, keep coding and see you soon. Bye.